All right, good morning, everybody. We are on today's Daf Yud. We left off the top of Daf Yud. We were discussing a case. Now, so let's get back into the case we were discussing. We talked about this concept of when you have a mavui, okay? And we said, okay, you need a lechi at the end. A lechi is basically some sort of vertical pole of some sort standing up that one recognizes basically a separation between the alleyway, the mavui, and the public domain, the Rishus HaRabim. Now, so the issue becomes, where do you put this lechi? So it's a machlokes whether the lechi has to be seen or not from the inside. Because in other words, let's say, the alleyway, you walk out into the Rishus HaRabim, and let's say the lechi is right around the corner, right around the corner. So if you're inside the alleyway, you can't see it. But if you're in the street, you can see the lechi because it's facing them. So there's machlokes, and we want to bring in the Mishnah that is brought later on. We had the Mishnah discuss the case of two chatzeros, one bigger, one smaller, and so the smaller one, if the fence between the two of them break down, we say the bigger one you can go ahead and you're allowed to go ahead and carry in the larger chatzer, but the smaller one you cannot. And that was basically, if you look at some of the pictures we had on the bottom of 9b3, at least the real case actually is on 9b2, in terms of that scenario where you have the smaller into larger. So therefore, while standing the smaller, you can't see the mavui because it goes around and extended the sides. And we had a machlokes why that case you're not allowed to go ahead and carry, despite the fact that, according to one opinion, holds that you don't have to see the lechi. That's called a lechi, which is on the outside, which is only seen from the outside, not for the inside. So we had a couple different answers for there. So now we left off 2 lines from the top on Yudam and Aleph. So it says, "Hi, my." So I don't understand. Let's go back. We have to analyze this case there. So if you hold that any lechi that cannot be seen from the inside, in other words, that basically when you have the small chutzner, right, right where the walls are broken, there's the walls that go out. So if those walls, right, the question is, can these walls right here constitute a lechi? Right, because you have the 2 walls here, so maybe since the walls go out, maybe there'll be a lechi. But if you hold that you can't see in the inside, so it makes sense why you can't carry in the small chatzir. And Rebbe Saber Lak Rabbi Yossi, and Rebbe, who is the author of the Mishnah, he would hold like Rabbi Yossi, that you need 2 lechis, 1 on each side, as we mentioned earlier, right? And not only that each one has to be a minimum of 3 tefachim. So the Ravzera with Ravina Lessa, and now which Rab Zera said. Now Rab Zera 2 teres. Rab Zera said that basically the fences or from the inside, the small chatzir protrude out into the large chatzir, and so now, and that would basically avoid not using those walls inside. In other words, we don't even need to say that. Also, the case of Ravina, right? Ravina said that we're talking about, in other words, when it wasn't completely centered, and therefore you wouldn't say level. One side was 2, the other side was 4. 4 is too large. So over there, Mishum Hachi Ketana be'Aser Ugedola be'Achas Asara Mishum the Rebbe Saber like Rabbi Yossi. Then it makes sense. In other words, why we're specifically talking about a case of where the chutzir, the smaller chutzir was 10 and the other one was 11. Why is that? Because if the outer one is 11, that means the 2 walls, right, at the edges of the small chutzir, each of those are 3 tefachim. And 3 tefachim, you need those walls in order to be able to carry in the big chutzir. Eli and Martinir, but if you hold that you don't have to see the lechi from the inside, and therefore maybe those walls on the out right around the corner there of the that come from the small one can constitute a lechi udrabzer ravina, and therefore we have to hold like rabzer ravina. In other words, we're talking about a case of where the reason why you can't carry in the small chutzner is because either the walls jet out, protrude, right, just like that picture on 9b3, right, where the walls protrude, and also according to Ravina, where one side was 2 and the other side was 4, just in that picture. Now, we go that, and that's the reason why we don't say that there's a lechi in this case. So if that's the case, the Rebbe loiser like Rabbi Yossi, and Rebbe would not look Rabbi Yossi. So Gedol b'achas straight lamali. So if Rebbe doesn't hold like Rabbi Yossi, that you need 1 on each side, and each one has to be 3 tefachim. So now and therefore, in this case, the reason why you can't carry inside is because you don't really have a lechi, even though you could have had a lechi. So why did the Gemara later on establish this case of the small chutzner being 10 and the other chutzner being 11? It doesn't make sense. Why? Because like the Manav Shach, if you want to go ahead and say, hey, we need the outer one to be 11, in other words, one more amos wider than the inner one in order to have 3 tefachim on each side. So be'eser shtei tefachim saga. All you need is, you don't need 3 tefachim on the side. All you need is 1 tefach. If you need 1 tefach, therefore the larger chatzar should be only wider by 2 tefachim. So the smaller chatzar can be 10 amos, and the larger one can be 10 amos and 2 tefachim. And if the reason why we need it to be 11 is in order to aser and say that you don't have any lechis for the inner one, so the ashmin and the miflik tuva. Why do you, if you can't use a lechi anyways on the outside, why does it have to be only 11? It could be even 15 or 100 amos wide. It doesn't make any sense. Elav shmamina. Rather, now we must conclude that according to this Mishnah, the Mishnah holds that if you're on the inside and you cannot see the lechi, even though despite halachically perhaps you could have said the lechi is on the outside, it must be that it does not constitute a lechi, and therefore there is no lechi for the small chutzner, and therefore you won't be able to carry shma mina. Indeed, learn from here. Fine. So now, clear that difficult sugya. New sugya. Amar Rav Yosef. So the third bottom skinny line. Amar Rav Yosef, lo yishmi'a li hashmaitza. So Rav Yosef says, I never heard this limud when it comes to having a lechi, whether you have to see it from the inside or not. So what are you talking about? You're actually the one who taught us this halacha. In which case, it was on this case. Now, you have a lechi, let's say, that extends beyond the wall of the mavi. So if you go ahead and take a look at the art scroll, look at picture A. Sorry, which one it is, but look at picture A. So you see that the mavui is there at the end, right? It's like an extension. It's a smooth transition. In other words, it's flush against, here's the wall, and then the mavui is just attached next to the, over there. It's a little shorter, so you can see that it's considered to be a lechi, but it's attached at the end of the mavui. So if we say over there, so we said. So pachas midalad amos, if it's less than dalad amos, nida mishum lechi, then it's considered to be a lechi. Umishtamesh im chuda hapanimi, right? Then you can say over there, you can go ahead and use it, right? In other words, that's considered to be a lechi, and therefore, in such a case, you would be able to go ahead and use it up until where the lechi begins, right? Up until where the lechi begins. And dalad amos, if however the lechi is longer than dalad amos, then nido mishum mavui, then it's no longer considered to be a lechi to the large mavui, rather it's its own mavui, right? The aser lishtamesh the bekulo, and you wouldn't be able to carry at all in any of it. Why? Because there is you don't have a lechi. You told us halacha on this. What was the case? Shmami no. Tlas. Learn from here 3 things. First of all, shmami no ben lechi and aser. First of all, when it acts as a lechi, you couldn't carry next to. You can only carry up and to it. So first of all, the halacha is that you can't carry by the lechi. And the second halacha is shmami no mashach mavui ba'arba. The second halacha is that the length, right, or the size of the mavui has to be 4 amos, right? By 4 amos. Also, since it was flush, which is the halacha we're bringing here, since it was flush, right, and you can see it only from the outside, but you can't see it from the inside, nido mishum lechi, and it is considered to be a lechi, and it does work. The halacha is that if you can see it from the outside, even though you can't see it from the inside, it's still considered to be a lechi. So the Gemara says, "Tiyufta v'hilchasa." I understand. We had a Mishnah that taught that you can't carry in the small chutzner. So that Mishnah, which we said earlier, which we quoted a number of times, is obvious that you can't carry it because you can't count the walls on the outside as a lechi. So, and it appears that if you speak, and that's the reason, it appears that aser is because you can't see from the inside. So the Gemara says, yes. Ian, the halacha is that way. Why? In Mishum Detani, Reb Chia Kavasi. It's rather because Reb Chia taught a brisa against that Mishnah, and therefore we pass like Reb Chia and not like the Mishnah. Fine. 2 dots. Now, when I say new sugya, now this is a completely new sugya, right? So now this is going back to our Mishnah, right? Our Mishnah, those you recall, the Mishnah on Beis Amud Aleph. So the Mishnah over there said, if you have so the width is only supposed to be 10 amos. And so he says, V'harachav me'eser amos, and if it's more than that, then you might, right? Then you should go ahead and make it smaller. All right, you have to make it so, in other words, the width, the entranceway to the mavoi, to the alleyway, can only be 10 amos. If it's too long, if it's 12, 15, 20 amos, then you have to make it shorter. So let's see the Gemara. So I'm going to buy Satana V'harachav me'eser, you might. And Rabbi Yehuda Amir and Tzichlomai, then Rabbi Yehuda, according to this Brisa, says you don't have to go ahead and make it smaller. It can be longer. V'ad kama, and how wide can it be? So Savar Rav Acha coming to Rav Yosef, the member ad shleish esrei amma v'shlish, 13 and a third amma, right? Which is a number that's used somewhere else. The kal v'chomer with pasi biros, and it's a kal v'chomer from the case of pasi biros. Now pasi biros is a case of where when they used to go ahead and travel to Eretz Yisrael for Shlosh Regalim, and Shabbos would come, and they would go ahead and camp, let's say, around a well. And how can they go? They're in the Shus Harabim, and they want to go ahead and take water. So what they would do is set up 4 L-shaped walls, basically, and they did not connect at all. Basically, 4 L's around, basically at the corners. Okay, and those L-shaped would act as walls, even though the fact that you can go in between, right? If the well was right here, right? So you can set up here, you can set up here, right? Here and here. Right, so you get all the corners, and we say over there, as long as there's less than 13 and a third amos, right? The halacha, the Gemara later on will explain where the shir comes from. But as long as the 10. Opening, what?
I thought 10 is the maximum.
10 is the maximum when it comes to the mavui. But now we're saying when it comes to pasi biros, over there, it's a special case over there, and we learn it's 13 and a third. So maybe Rabbi Yehuda also holds, what's the entranceway over here? Just like pasi biros, 13 and a third. And what does he learn it from? And they want to learn it as a kal v'chomer. What's the kal v'chomer? Ma pasi biros she'itrata behen paros merubal oimed. In the case of pasi biros, which we allow even to have more opening than standing wall. In other words, we just have the corners, right, as walls, but the between the corners, obviously, the walls on the sides are open. Right? They didn't allow more than 13 a third amas opening. So mavui, but a mavui but when it comes to mavui, that they did not permit to have more openings than closings. Certainly they shouldn't allow to have more than 13 and a third. However, the Gemara argues, says, no, v'hino senas. You can argue the other way. So pasi biros parts So when it comes to pasi biros, so we're more makel there, right? We allow even to have more opening than standing wall. And over there, the maximum was 13 and a third. So but a mavui, if you have more walls, right? You have more walls. Let's say you have 40 amos of wall, there's no reason why you can't have more than 13 and a third, right? Maybe you should have more than 13 and a third, right? Inami or lidach, he said that way. So pasi biros maybe by pasi biros, since we don't require to have more wall than opening space, we say, okay, it's a kula, and therefore we can allow even to 13 and a third. So in other words, we allow kulos when it comes to pasi biros. However, mavui, klal low, but maybe mavui, we don't allow to having more open space than enclosed wall. So also we shouldn't allow up to 13 and a third. So therefore, the Gemara does not like this answer. So Tani Levi taught mavui shu rachav. So we don't have an answer in terms of what Rabbi Yehuda, what was his limit. So let's see. So Tani Levi mavui shu rachav esrim amma. You have a mavui that was 20 amos wide. So you go ahead and fix this entrance. So now it's kind of of Vidayo. What do? I have an idea, right? So if it's exactly 20 amos, so you go ahead and take a board, put that board in the middle. So now each side is basically 9.8, and each side is less than 10 amos, and therefore you have 2 entrances. Each one is less than 10 amos, should be fine. However, Who tani love, who amir la de'ein halachayis Mishnah, right? And he taught that, he says, however, the halacha is not like that. In other words, that would not fix the situation. And Igadar is a different version. Amar Shmuel Mishmei the Levi ein halachayis Mishnah. There isn't a halacha is not like that Mishnah. So we'll soon see why that was no good. So what should we do? So Amar Shmuel Mishmei the Levi says, Shmuel in the name of Levi. Turn the page. Oisa pas gavoa asara b'meshach arba amos. Go ahead, take yourself a board, right? take the board, make it 10 tefachim tall. In other words, that should be the height of a wall, and let it be 4 amos long. And then go ahead and position it right for the length of the mavui. In other words, go ahead and put it. So now, if you look at the picture over here, and by number 1, right? So you see the picture. Morning, how are you? So over here, you see the picture. Actually, no, wrong picture. Yeah, this one, right? So you see that this picture here. So you see that wall over there. That is wider. Hold on one second.
I think let's keep on trucking.
I didn't realize I just had someone walk in the office. Okay, anyway, so fine. So we say over here that, so you put a board. So now the board is basically, it's its own entity. So since it's wide, it's like its own mavui. So it's a separate mavui. So then put it the length of the mavui. So that would be one case. So therefore now it creates a new mavui, and therefore that would be sufficient. Right, each side of that board would now be its own mavui. It's considered to be 2 separate mavuis and not one. Inami, or Rav Yehuda, Damar Rav Yehuda, or you say like Rav Yehuda. The Rav Yehuda says mavui shurachav chamesh esrei amma marchik shtei amas. What do you do? Let's say it's 15 amos. So what do you do? Marchik shtei amas. So you go ahead, you go off the wall 2 amos. And then you go ahead and make a board of 3 amos, right? And therefore, if you look at so in other words, the bottom picture, right? The bottom picture over here, right, shows what they did. You're right. You take a 2 amos separation, and then you do a 3 amos board, and then you have 10. So 10 is okay. And then also the 3 is larger than the 2, and therefore you basically, since that's less than 3 tefachim, or since that's larger, right? It's not 3 tefachim, it's 2 amos, right? Which is more than 3 tefachim. But since it's larger, therefore it's considered to be closed up, right? We don't need that to be a wall. It doesn't have to be enclosed, but it's closed up, right? Now, so why do you got to do that? Maybe there's other suggestions. What about this case? Go ahead and take one board that's 1.5, right? And make a separation of 2. And then there's another 1.5. So you know it's 1.5, 2, 1.5, like the picture by number 8, right? If you see number 8, the picture over there, right? Picture number 8, you have 1.5 with a 2 and 1.5. So why didn't you do that? That seems to be good, because then the 2, right, the 1.5 and 1.5 is a total of 3. So 3 was more than the 2 in between, and it should be okay. So you say, so Shmamina, but by the fact it doesn't say that, so if the only way that the walls are more than the space is by adding 2 together, because 1.5 is less than 2, but 1.5 plus 1.5 is more than 2, right? So therefore, it wouldn't work in this case. In other words, you have to have each wall, right, greater than the space in between in order to basically block it out. Say it's more, I made merubal aparutz. So and ours is so maybe it says really it is maybe it really would work. However, but maybe there's another issue here. The problem is like this: when you look at board, air board, and okay, there's 2 more boards, it's fine. But look at a different way. Look at it. You have the air of being 2 amos. Then you have 1.5 amma, and then 10 amos. So now you have basically a board of 1.5 being sandwiched in between 2 aviros, and therefore those will be mavato that wall, and therefore that's the reason perhaps why that's no good. So I says, okay, I have another suggestion. So v'yas pas amma, v'yarchik amma, v'yas. So why don't you make a pass of 1 amma, and then distance of 1 amma, v'yas pas amma, and then do another one. So in other words, basically do, right, if you look at the picture down there, basically a board of 1 amma, space 1 amma, board 1 amma, space 1 amma, board 1 amma, right? So that's total 5, the other side is 10, and therefore you have in between. And once again, over here, you don't have more. It's not wider than the others. Right? So Shramina, but why didn't it say that? Must be Aimi Kaparit's Asr. It's still, even if they're both equal, it's not enough. In other words, you have to have the board, each board individually has to be larger than the individual space. And the said, no, maybe that's not even the problem. Maybe there's a different problem. The other really it's fine. However, perhaps if you go ahead and take the board that's most towards the middle, right? And that one is surrounded by over on one side to be 1, and the other side to be 10. That's the reason why it's mavata. So the Gemara has another suggestion. V'yarchik ama. Maybe go ahead like this. Distance an ama. V'yasa pas ama mechza. Go ahead and make a board of 1.5. V'yarchik ama v'yasa pas ama mechza. And then go ahead and make another board of 1.5, like the other picture at the bottom. And in this case, basically over here, each space is 1.5, and then the board is more than each of the airspace. So therefore, it wouldn't be a problem. It's not a problem of both sides of any of the boards having more space, because it's not. So you're right. You could have done it. However, but the Gemara says, you know what's easier than doing a space of 1 amma, then 1.5, then 1, then another board of 1.5, is just taking a board of 3 and just putting it there. So therefore, the Rabbanan said, do this case, it's much easier. So what about this? If now we're saying that you have a board of 3, and then you have a space of one side that's 2 amos, and therefore that's basically considered to be covered up because that's next to the edge of the wall, and you have a board of 3, and where's the only entrance? The other only entrance is the 10 amma entrance to the side. But what about the fact that people might start going through the 2 amma entrance, and therefore basically being mevatel that as a wall? If people start using that to going in and out to the mavui, maybe it's no longer going to be a wall. So our answers. Amar Ravada bar Masna, says Ravada bar Masna, Chazaka ein adam tare meniach pesach gadol v'nichal pesach katan. Right? There's a chazaka. If there's 2 entrances there, the person will go ahead and only enter the larger entrance. Right? Why would anyone sneak through, the 2 am entrance to walk to the 10 am entrance? But what about the case of Rabbi Ami Bar Masi? We saw earlier. And Daf Hey, it said over there in the case of when you had the edge of the wall that broke, that carried the korah, the beam. So as long as it was something that was 4 amos that held up the board, it was okay, even though the wall was broken next to it. So over there, why? How come people will walk over there, right? Or so we say over there, people walk over there. So Ma'ashem Rabbi Rasi. So Hasan Kamai Belucha, over there, the reason why people use that and it's no good is why? Because it's on the other side, right? It's like a shortcut. It's along the sidewall. It's not along the main entrance. So therefore, people will use it. However, over here, it's no shortcut over here. Since it's not a shortcut, therefore, people would only use the larger one, and therefore that the smaller one would still be basically part of the wall. Fine. So Tanan Hasim, now we're going to actually bring a proof for this machlokes from another case on Hasim, or Ha'asola, the Chol Shalo. It's starting with Tefach. So you have the hide of an asola chair. Well, since you know what that is, and then it's space in between. So basically, it's almost like a lattice, right? It's like, straps with like, since it's like be like a toilet seat, right? So strapped with space in the middle. So for chol shalai mitzarfin, but tefach, in other words, as long as you have the straps, I guess, where you sit, and then the space in between is at least a tefach, or a very small seat, it would be considered to be an ohel. So my or ha'asala was this or ha'asala samarabba barachan or kisui shel beis hakisei. That's like basically the cover, right? The seat, the top of a beis hakisei. Vikama. And how do you get to? What does it mean? Is that and the airspace together is a tefach? Okay. Now tefach is made up of 6 etzbos. Vikama. So Dimi Amar etzboi mikan etzboi rebach. You have 2 on one side, 2 on the other, and a space of 2 in the middle. So that's a total of 6, and that means it's a tefach wide, and then same both ways, right? So as long as there's 6, 1 tefach long. So you 2, 2, and 2 in the middle. Okay, that is the first opinion. That is Rav Dimi. And Kiyasa Rabin came, so he says, no. Amar etzba umechza mikan. You have 1.5 on one side. The etzba umechza mikan, and 1.5 on the other side. The etzba rebach b'emsa, and you have 1 in the middle. He holds it's 4 etzbos. So basically 1.5 on one side, 1.5 on the other, and then in the middle is only 1. So 1.5 is 3, plus the 1 in the middle is 4. So he basically says 4 etzbos. The other opinion said 6 etzbos, and so Amarle Abai the Rav Dimi said Kiplikso. So he said to the argument, Amarle Lo. So Ha B'Ravasa, Ha B'Zutrasa. Right? No, it's not about arguing, because one is talking about a larger etzbah. Versus the other one, the larger etzbah is basically the size of an etzbah and a half. So therefore, basically 1.5 times 4 equals 6 of these small ones. So really, there is no argument. Each of them hold that the total amount from the end to end is a total of 6 etzbahs. So he said, however, no, actually they do argue. Why? The Aimed Meruba Alaparetz Mishtei Ruchais Pliksu. Right? It appears that they argue in a case of where the do you require, right, the part that's the wall, right? In this case, where it's the strap, right, which is one opinion is held it was 222, and the other one was 1.5 airspace of 1 and 1.5. It appears to be that there's a machlokas in a case of where the strap is not larger on both sides than the airspace, right? So the parts the din according to you according to you it's considered to be fine. However, the rabbin in other words, over here he seems to require that only if both sides are more, but if the both sides were not more, then it wouldn't be good. Because if there's no machlokes, the rabbin hachi boile lememar right? Rather, because he should have just said, okay, you want to equal 4, 1 1/3, 1 1/3, 1 1/3, right? You could have done that case. Why didn't you do that, right? Why did you have to say 1.5 and 1.5 and 1? Why did you require the parts of the straps to be more than the airspace in between? Because the other one didn't. The other one held 222. They was the same size. It must be that according to Rabin, the second opinion, he held that if the straps were the same size as the airspace, it's no good. So that's why he had to create a scenario, right, where it was not 1 1/3, 1 1/3, and 1 1/3. Rather, he had to create a scenario of when it was 1.5, 1, then 1.5. The Elamai, so the Gemara says, why? Plaginan, do we argue? So Didi, Haki Boiler the Memar. So he says, according to me, this just it should have been what? It should have been what? According to the one who held, it had to be 6. So Etzba Ushnei Shlishim, right? 1 2/3 Mikan, right? The Etzba Ushnei Shlishim Mikam, and 1 2/3 on the other side. The Etzba Ushnei Shlishim Revach, and then you have 2 2/3 in the middle. Right? But why didn't he say that? It's Ali Ikal Meimar, the Pagin, and rather you say they argue, but parts Amid Pagin. So notice he didn't hold that the airspace in the middle can be smaller. Actually, it can be larger as long than each one, but the two sides together can be bigger. That he wouldn't even agree with, right? He had to say no. According to the first opinion, he had to hold that the sides have to at least be the same size, and it's okay. As opposed to the second opinion that holds that no, the sides, the walls and the sides have to be larger than the space in between. We'll stop here at the 2 dots. Everyone should have a wonderful day, and Mirz Hashem, we will continue tomorrow. All right, have a good one.